We're ready when you are. I'm going to go ahead and call this May 1st, 2023 meeting of the Whitefish City Council to order. Thanks everyone for coming this evening. We also have folks participating in hybrid via Teams, so welcome to those audience members as well. I'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Eric, would you lead us this evening in the pledge? Eric? Yeah, it's okay. Thank you, Eric. We'll move on to communications from the public. We do have two public hearings advertised for this evening under item 6. So if you're here to speak to those individual hearings, please wait until I call them. Otherwise, if you have anything to bring to the attention of the council, now's your opportunity. Name and address for the record, please, Mary. Thank you.
So good evening, Mary Flowers, Citizens for a Better Flathead, 135 Main Street in Kalispell is where our office is located. We work obviously countywide. I have two items to bring to your attention tonight. I'll start first with the information that's in your packet regarding the proposal to build a septic receiving station to treat septic waste and biosolids. And as you're probably aware, the county decided not to move forward with the purchase of the property that they were looking at. Furthermore, Lakeside has not moved forward with an application to be able to handle additional wastewater. And what we are asking the county to do is to consider anaerobic digestion as an energy process to take that waste, both the biosolids from the three cities and the septic waste, and to generate electricity. In the handouts that I provided you, there's a lot of background information. The county has asked the Public Works Director, Dave Prunty, to work with some of the engineers he works with, some of whom are very familiar with this process, to do an analysis from a higher level to look at, is this something that might be feasible? Right now, we're kind of in a stuck place without a solution, and the hope is that this might open some doors. We've had the opportunity to talk with a professor at the Washington State University, who's one of the lead researchers in some of the cutting-edge energy production from these facilities. And so the hope is to get her to be able to come and visit in the community and talk about the work that she's doing and have us look at this as a win-win for both the septic waste no longer being applied, a land application, and to seeing it become an energy source. A lot of folks don't know that the landfill is an energy producer because they vacuum out the methane gas that is produced naturally in the process of burying that garbage. And they've just added a second generator, so they're going to be able to double the number of homes that they're generating electricity for in the Flathead. So it's a viable alternative that we just think needs a lot more eyes, and hope you will encourage the county and your Public Works Department to look at this as well. The second item that I want to speak to you is the one I just provided you a handout. And I understand that the zoning text amendment that you have before you in your consent agenda, the intent of that is to say, now we can finally at last be able to do zoning and annexation at the same time. Well, I talked to planners today in a number of communities around the state, Kalispell and Great Falls in particular. Both of them said, we've been doing that forever. You know, there's nothing contradictory in state law that would not allow you to move forward with doing a joint hearing. Well, you have to make two decisions, but doing them in the same meeting. And so I've provided you the other thing that all of these cities, and I looked at Kalispell, Great Falls, Helena, Billings, and then at Missoula again. All of these three cities have very strong language in their zoning codes, and I've provided you text for that here, that really links the intent of their annexation to comply with their growth policy, to comply with the intent of the vision of the community on how it wants to grow. I think that's really missing from the zoning text amendment that you have before you tonight. It's, as we pointed out last week, or the last council meeting, it limits you by saying that you need to consider county zoning. Nowhere in the statute under annexation by petition does it say that you have to do that. Nowhere in these zoning regulations for Kalispell, for Helena, for Billings, for Great Falls do they say that. But what they emphasize is that they are annexing to improve their city, to grow in a way that's effective. And when I went back and I looked at 2021, your packet, June, I think it was 24th, where you discussed annexation, and this was brought to you after a couple of work sessions and whatnot. But there was never any forward movement that I've been able to find on kind of this comprehensive set of standards for annexation. And you'll look in the information I've sent you and provided you, and these communities include things like providing information on transportation impacts, providing engineering reports. Some of the things that you've talked about in past workshops about wanting to have more information when this zoning comes before you for annexation. And so there's no deadline for what you have to do tonight. I would really encourage you to pull this from your agenda, to look at this material, and to come back with a little broader, more comprehensive response to how you're going to do annexation moving forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
And I do have hard copies if anyone didn't have them of the septic information. Anybody want those?
I'll take one too, Mary. Thank you. Further public comment tonight? Ed?
Hello, Council, Mayor. Thank you for what you guys do. I wrote you a letter today asking for extension to the casino overlay to include my property to allow a few casino machines. And I figured, I thought a little more of it and thought maybe a better way is to change the definition from casino to anything with 5 or more machines, maybe. Something to make it easy. And all I'm saying is, like, it's just getting harder to be in business, to be honest. And I never wanted casino machines in my bar, but the guy said it could bring me in 50 or 60 grand a year if I have a couple of them. So I said I'm going to go to work and try to convince you guys to let me do it. You know, there was casino machines there when the Dyer was there. You know, it wouldn't be a casino by any means. It's just, you know, 3 or 4 machines is what I'm asking for to help me bring in some money, extra money. I mean, you know, how much prices are going up. And I think we just got our 7th corporate restaurant. And that's what we're in for, is we're going to have a lot of corporate restaurants here. And I'm probably one of the last guys that open a regular restaurant, I guess, you know. And I'm just looking for a little help to hopefully maybe you guys can figure out a way to maybe just get me to have 3 or 4 machines and y'all can win a lot of money, right? You know, you never know. I mean, you never know. Thanks.
Thanks, Ed. We'll be speaking about this under item 8 of the agenda later this evening. Further public comment? Michelle, anyone online? We'll go ahead and close the public comment period. And we do have a few volunteer board reports. Is Dwan here with the Housing Authority? Okay. And then Julie, you wanted to make some comments as well tonight, or no? No. Okay, great, just checking. Thanks. Okay.
Ben Johnson with the Whitefish Housing Authority, 813 Trailview Way. I just wanted to introduce Dwan Hawkins. He's the interim director at the Housing Authority. I think the last time that we gave an update here at Council from the Housing Authority was when we had recently offered him a position in January. So I wanted to introduce him and give him a chance to give you all some updates on what's been going on at the Housing Authority.
Thanks, Ben, and welcome, Dwan.
Hi, good evening to everyone, and Mr. Mayor and the council. I had originally thought I was escaping the St. Louis heat, but I guess it followed me here.
Apparently not.
I want to say that my time spent here so far has been an enjoyable one. At the Housing Authority so far, we have have done a lot of internal infrastructure and systems upgrades, and along with compliance and reporting. That's been most of my time so far. I think we've done a pretty good job with the staff we have, being diligent, making sure HUD is pleased with our work. More so that, I want to make sure the HUD is pleased so that, when we ask for money, they won't have a problem with giving it to us. A lot of our work has been making sure that the Housing Authority does live long beyond my tenure, or whoever else's tenure will follow mine. We look forward to a great relationship with the city and the components of the city, working with the mayor and the council to making sure affordable housing is attainable. I come from larger cities, Baltimore and East St. Louis, and the demand for housing is much different. There you see you see a lot of despair and people not being able to live in the place where they were raised and born because of out of control rents and housing prices. And so I was just fascinated when I came here that you suffer from the same things, albeit the tax bracket is a little different. Not being able to live where you've grown up, and I don't know how that feels, so I can understand a bit of despair, how that could come about. We're here to help. We're here to make sure that whatever we can do to put our resources together with yours to make a better Whitefish is our sole priority. I know there's been there have been many questions about the Depot Park location. As it stands today, we have submitted our utility drawings to the city, and so we're just waiting on those utility drawings to come back and be approved, hopefully, and we will pass on the approval to DEQ. DEQ will do their process, and then I think that is kind of where the ball will start to roll a little bit more faster. Much of the holdup was prior to me joining, there was an environmental done that said that we did sustain a lot of water in the ground, and so that was the urgency for the snow to be, there was a huge urgency for the snow to be removed. During that time, we didn't anticipate all the snow we did receive, and so we did receive a little bit more than we were expecting, and so I don't think that should be a problem now with it being spring, so I think we should hear a little bit more as it relates to Depot Park coming along. In addition to that, our bid documents and our specs are pretty much done. We're just waiting for DEQ to finish the process, and then I think we should see a lot of movement, groundbreaking during that time. That's all I have. If anyone else has any questions.
Any questions for Dwan? Just quick, go ahead, Rebecca.
I just wanted to clarify, you're saying Depot Park, but you mean the snow lot?
So the official name is Depot Park,
Oh,
but it is a snow lot, yes.
Okay, all right, sorry. I
So it's
forgot that
unofficially the snow lot, but it is officially Depot Park Townhomes.
Townhomes, okay, thank you. And then, do you think you'll be breaking ground this year?
So I don't know. I don't want you to hold me to it, but I don't see why we cannot. I haven't seen anything that supports us not being able to. But we have a meeting tomorrow morning, and so if I hear anything different, I will let you know.
Further questions for Dwan? I just wanted to thank you for coming and introducing yourself tonight, and I'd love the opportunity to sit down with you and Ben and talk about the Housing Authority and our future partnership working with you.
Sure, thank you.
I'll reach out.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Dwan. Yes, Julie, by all means.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Mullins. I live at 122 Hawthorne Court here in Whitefish. I am the executive director of Explore Whitefish, and I'm just about to start my 5th week. I really just wanted to take this opportunity. I didn't prepare anything for tonight, but I really just wanted to introduce myself to each of you and let you know that my line is open at any time if you have any questions about Explore Whitefish. We do have a program that has been in the news recently called our CSF. And I did want to let the council know that while this is a private fund from Explore Whitefish, I know you all have been receiving some heat from that as well and some comments. We are doing a complete and total evaluation of this program. We are meeting with each one of our CSF members to understand if this program is working, and we will report back on our findings. But I just wanted to let you know that we take the grievances and the controversy very seriously, and we're looking at how to make our program better, not only for our members, but for the community of Whitefish.
Thank you, Julie. Appreciate that. Any questions for Julie? Not seeing any. Thanks very much for coming tonight. Volunteer board reports with the council. Giuseppe.
Yes, I have 3. First of all, the Montana West Economic Development, which it's a board that meets once a month, and they do great stuff. For instance, they have out $5 million in loans for businesses in the area, and Ed left, but he could have bought some machines with 400 that still need to go out. They are announcing a community day and to outreach into the community and to explain what they do and to listen to input. I hear that Columbia Falls, Kalispell, Big Fork had a lot of RSVPs. Whitefish is a bit quieter. So I wanted to advertise the fact that the community day of the Montana West Economic Development in Whitefish will be May 8th from 9 a.m. till 10 a.m. in National Park Realty. So you're all invited. Find them on the website and RSVP, please. The second board I'm reporting on is the Pedestrian and Bike Path Committee. 5/24, we will have a bike and walk to work day. I know Steve Cunell does it every day anyhow, but we could all do it with that. 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., there will be events downtown between Black Star and across the street, more or less. So everybody puts down this date, 5/24, 4 p.m. till 6 p.m. And lastly, the Impact Fee Committee, which I thought it was going to be an easy one because It met only once a year until I got appointed, and we've done it 4 times already this year. But my report is that we're doing good progress, and hopefully once you see the results, you'll all be pleased. I'm pleased at the fact that now we're moving forward with methodology, accountability, and good process. Thank you.
Thanks, Giuseppe. Steve? Frank?
Yeah, the park board met right after our last meeting, and I guess one of the highlights was that apparently they've done some fundraising, and it looks like they want to build some pickleball courts out at the Kids Sports. And they've got the funding to do it, and Kids Sports is interested in having them do it. So I think they're going to end up with about 8, 10 pickleball courts out there
Great.
at some point.
So, wonderful. Rebecca?
Yep. I went to Arbor Day on Friday. Our celebration was in Depot Park, and our arborists and the 8th graders planted 4 trees. It was really, it's interesting how hard they work for us. One of them is named Sheila, that's a red maple, and the other one is a red something, birch, I think. So 2 of them are for water drainage, and 2 of them are for visually looking up at the mountain in the fall with some red highlights. So we do that every year, and it was enjoyable and fun.
Great. Thanks, Rebecca. Nothing tonight, Andy? We will move on to our consent agenda. You do have the minutes from the regular as well as special session from April 17th. Can I have a motion, please?
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Quinnell. Further discussion? Yes. I saw Giuseppe's hand first.
Just a little typo, Michelle, at page 40, under item 3, there is a number there that says 900,00. It should be one more 0 after the comma.
Thanks, Giuseppe. Rebecca?
Yeah, I'd like to pull ordinance number 23-06 from the consent agenda, because I'm frankly confused about what Mary's talking about, and I was wondering...
Before we comment, where would you like it scheduled on the agenda? Do you want to discuss it right now?
Oh, yeah, okay,
Now?
yeah,
Okay. The mic is yours.
okay. I'm confused about what she's recommending, and I was wondering if staff could take her comments, if we delayed it for 2 weeks, the decision, and then let us know if there's anything that they think that we should integrate to make it a better policy. I don't know that there's any problem with delaying 2 weeks, is there? Dave, Angie? Okay.
Just a point of order, Mr. Mayor. I
Steve.
believe it requires a motion to table something or to postpone it.
No, you can remove an item from the consent agenda. She voted in favor.
Okay. But it doesn't require a motion to,
If we were to table it or postpone it or direct staff to take action, then it will require a motion and a second.
okay. Well, she's asking for staff to weigh in on whether we should postpone it without a motion on the table.
Does that require a motion, Angie, just to have a discussion?
No, I think you guys can have the discussion. But, I
Yep.
mean, from my viewpoint, no, another 2 weeks isn't going to matter, truthfully.
I'd like to, is now when I'm, okay. I'd like to make a motion to delay or ordinance number 2306 for 2 weeks and have the staff assign.
Let's see if we get a second first. So that was a motion to postpone to a date certain, which would be the second meeting.
The second meeting in May.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion?
For purposes of further discussion, yes, I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Rebecca?
If there's no rush, I'd like input from the staff about how these other cities are handling this situation. And if we could make it simpler for the future.
Further comments from the council? Steve?
I just have a question for, it's either Dave or Angie could weigh in on this. I mean, what I'm seeing here is that from Mary's letter, one of the big sticking points is that that we don't have language in the zoning text amendment that says that the annexation has to be consistent with the city's growth policy, but all, if I'm not mistaken, all zoning, or all annexations and zoning changes require that the zoning changes meet 6 criteria. Is it 6 or 7 criteria? Is that right?
Yeah, we have specific criteria for rezones in the code, and then, this language does say it has to be consistent with the land use and zoning recommendations adopted in the growth policy and any amendments, and so that language is in there.
Okay.
Again, this is the language that Missoula relies on. We just have to change our code to allow us to do it at the same time because we have a separate process for zone changes. And without this, we have to go through the laborious process of going to the planning board and doing all the other stuff that makes it take 3 or 4 months.
Okay.
So,
But there is criteria that requires that any zone change meets the growth policy.
yep, absolutely, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Giuseppe?
Yes, question for Dave. Since we're talking about criteria, am I correct that where we don't reach in rules, the Montana Code annotated Title 76, Chapter 2, Planning and Zoning, Part 3 defines the remaining criteria, hence, for instance, I, authorized land use is comparable to the land use authorized by county zoning, and triple I, are consistent with zoning requirements recommended in a growth policy adopted pursuant to Title 76, Chapter 1 for the annexed property. Am I correct?
yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Giuseppe. Further questions for staff? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion does die on a 4-1 vote with Rebecca Norton voting in favor. We will move on to item 6. We have 2 public hearings scheduled for this evening.
Mr. Mayor, I don't think we voted on the consent agenda.
Excuse me. Thank you. All those in favor of adopting the consent agenda, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. And that motion does carry. Thank you, Frank. We'll move on to item 6A, which will be ordinance 23-7, an ordinance rezoning 11.18 acres of land located at 111 Iverson Lane, 119 Iverson Lane, 140 Iverson Lane, and 6010 US Highway 93 South, located in Section 12, Township 30 North, Range 22 West in Flathead County, Montana, zoned Flathead County B4 HO Secondary Business District Highway Overlay, and SAG 5 HO Suburban Agriculture Highway Overlay to WB2 Secondary Business District and WCR Country Residential District, and adopting findings with respect to such rezone, and this will be on a first reading. Wendy.
All right, good evening. So the planning board ended up holding 2 public hearings on this. There was a public hearing in March that they then postponed until April waiting for the WBT zoning district to be fully adopted after the 30-day wait. So the staff report you have before you is the updated staff report for the April planning board meeting. So again, they postponed action in March in order to consider the newly adopted WBT zoning district that went into effect on March 21st. A couple of other items that were included in the packet for the planning board and also for you folks is a comparison of the 2 different zoning districts, because that question had come up for planning board, and also a copy of the WBT and the WB2. I thought it would be helpful for planning board and probably for you folks as well, just to see the zoning history for this property. When the county took the planning jurisdiction back in, what was it, 2016, the county zoned this area B2A, which was their equivalent of our WB2, and then a SEG 5, and then an R 2.5. We were also able to find, we have a really old zoning map down in the basement that's kind of the first sort of overall zoning map from 1982, and it showed WB2 along the fronts of these properties and then an egg in the back. In 2017, the neighbors and property owners in this corridor, they got together to propose a different type of zone. They wanted to have a little bit more expanded uses because it had been, as you may recall, a SEG 5 south of Highway 40. During this process, the city was really encouraging the county to use The BSD, which is our equivalent of our WBSD, is a bit more of a transitional zone because we didn't want to see retail get sprawled out south of Highway 40, and we thought it was a more suitable transition. But again, it was sort of the Highway 40 and south was what we were looking at. Ultimately, in 2017, what was approved by the county was a B4/HO, which is the secondary business highway overlay zone. The B4 is unique to Whitefish. There isn't any other in the entire county. So it was similar to the B2A, but it had quite a bit more expanded level of uses. So again, the request here is to go from a SAG 5 to a WCR and a B4 to a WB2 because the property got annexed back in February. But the purpose and intent of the WCR, and then I included both the WB2 and the WBT, as well as the development standards in that packet. The HO designation, as you'll recall, the county doesn't necessarily have like landscaping and dark skies and arc review and things like that, and so that was sort of their attempt to provide this sort of transitional area as one came into Whitefish, but in the county side. And they're very similar to our standards. Ours are more rigorous, but it was sort of their first kind of attempt at that. Again, the property is located, they're at 40 and 93. The growth policy designation is highway transitional and suburban residential in the back part. The properties are partially developed with single-family homes. Highway transitional talks about this designation as for commercial areas south of Highway 40 along the Highway 93 corridor that have recently applied for the Flathead County secondary business zoning. Text within the suburban residential talks about lower density on the edge of the urban areas, and the WCR is consistent with that. It's surrounded by residential and commercial uses, served by public services and facilities. We noticed the neighbors for the March Planning Board as well as the April Planning Board, and we got some comments that are included in your packet. There were some comments concerning an easement that the neighbors to the west have through this property. And while we can't condition a zone change, it seemed like a good idea to bring the issue up. So at some future application, subdivision, or conditional use permit, we're aware of this particular easement issue. But it is a private easement between two parties. The city is not involved. It doesn't involve any of our streets or utilities or anything. It is a private arrangement. And then there was also comment in support of the WBT zoning district. We review zone changes according to the criteria in the zoning regulations. Made in accordance with the growth policy. These properties were part of the Highway 93 South Plan, and they did have the highway transitional designation. But again, it talked about those areas being south of Highway 40, even though the map shows that B4, the highway transitional, being north of Highway 40, which is in your packet, that map is. So staff believes if it was zone WB2, which is what we're recommending, this would be the most southern extent of the WB2, which would line up with the town pump on the other side of the street. And anything south would be that WBT. This area is included in the city's extension of services plan, so services are available and can be extended to the property. The zoning designation will provide setbacks, height, lot coverage, and at the time of construction will comply with the building code. It is in the city limits and served by Highway 93 South, and is kind of in a unique situation because it is served by a signalized intersection where a lot of properties, further south and even the town pump across the street were not served by a signal. But the effects of motorized and non-motorized transportation will be reviewed at the time of development. We believe this proposed zone change would promote compatible growth because it's served by public services, and the proposed zoning is the most equivalent to the city and is implementing the Highway 93 corridor plan. It's considering the character of the district. So staff is recommending the WB2. The planning board at their April planning board meeting, 4 members of the public spoke, and those comments and minutes are in your packet. The planning board, we did offer alternate findings of fact because they were interested in considering the WBT, so we included that in our staff report. So the planning board did make a motion to approve the WCR and the WBT, and they did approve those amended findings of fact, which are in your packet. Can I answer any questions? So that is the recommendation coming before you, is WCR with a WBT.
Wendy, those findings are on page 86 of our packet, correct?
I think they start on,
80
no,
Starting on page 64, I made it as an exhibit to the transmittal letter.
Okay. Yep.
64.
So 64 through
Yeah,
66.
It's Exhibit A.
Then if you choose to adopt those findings, I'm sure we could put them in the ordinance at second reading.
Okay. Any questions for Wendy on her staff report? Rebecca?
Yeah, Wendy, I drove out there today, and there's actually 2 roads. So when we annex something, why wouldn't the other, not the road that's lighted, but the one to the north, why wouldn't that be considered a city road?
There's an easement, and it's called Iverson Lane. They named it for emergency services and probably the postal service, but it's not a street.
But
It's
it
an
looks-
easement.
But it looks like it has access to the highway.
Yeah, and they do have access to the highway, and those are the documents that the Iverson submitted as part of their public comment.
Right, but if this, so this is annexed into the city right now, and
Correct.
if it's used as an existing road, why wouldn't it be improved as a city road?
It's a private easement. It's not
Okay.
a public street.
And we're not going to make it a public street because
Not with
it's,
the zone change here, no.
yeah. I mean, in the future, could it be considered a,
I mean, those lots are really deep, and the lots to the north, they go back as far as the back side of, like Great Northern Heights. It goes far back. I could imagine some public streets being in that area to serve it.
well, I would think that we would want that at some point.
At
when
some
we-
point, for sure.
Yeah, so there, but I just was surprised that it actually abutted Highway 93 South, and people could go in and out of there, and that we haven't done planning for that. Okay, thank you.
Further questions for Wendy? Thanks, Wendy. Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing on item 6A, ordinance 23-7, and we'll hold that public hearing now. Eric, can I invite you to the podium, please? And just your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Eric Payne, as all of you should know by prior meetings, 100 Central Avenue, Whitefish. My partner in this project, Dean Gramay, here this evening as well.
Hey, Dean.
We represent the properties before you this evening. While it's obviously taken some time to get to this stage, we've both enjoyed the process and the chance to work with each of you. But we'll jump right into what we're here to discuss this evening. As we went over in the prior council meeting, we have requested the same WB2 zoning for these properties that they were formerly zoned, and that the city of Whitefish fought hard to retain for more than a decade. Actually, it goes back from what Wendy said, decades prior to that. We have brought these properties back to annexation, thanks to the council in a prior vote, and is now back within the city of Whitefish, asking only in return for the very zoning that was applied to them in prior years, and is also applied to the neighboring property directly across from them on Highway 93. Additionally, this property sits 90% of which inside the growth policy to be designated as WB2. I'll hold this one up. Carver Engineering created this display for you. You can see this represents the junction, the intersection. This tiny sliver, I think probably is why we're all here this evening. If we had it to do again, we would have simply recreated a third or fourth lot, and the portion that was outside and south of the intersection would not be part of our application for WB2. the small portion of which represents only 10% of the total square footage and should not create a technicality to impact the majority of this parcel. The land fits the very definition of WB2 and is why is stated as such in the growth policy. I'm going to read a very small excerpt from Article K that describes the purpose of WB2. This district is intended to provide for those retail sales and services, the operations of which are typically characterized by the need for large display or parking areas, large storage areas, and outdoor commercial amusement and recreational activities. Mixed use and multifamily development is also appropriate. The district depends on proximity to highways and arterial streets and may be located within business corridors and islands. The sentence that I find most applicable to this decision this evening is that states this district depends on proximity to highways or arterial streets. I'm sure that those who created this growth policy recognized these very parcels' proximity to this incredibly important intersection, and thus deem them suitable for WB2 zoning. They also recognize that the properties to the south of this intersection lack this very access and would be more suited for lower impact type uses, and why possibly the WB2 zoning may be more applicable to those specifically. That being said, I believe the WB2 zoning is far too restrictive, and why I do not believe it should apply to our zoning request. I would like to at least address it, as I feel pretty strongly that it will defeat the purpose for what we tried to start with this application, which is giving oversight for these properties back to this city, for this entire entrance to Whitefish, which is obviously the busiest intersection in the greater Whitefish area. I was asked by one of the counselors why I was apprehensive during a planning board meeting to WB2 zoning, as it would provide many of the same uses as WB2, only most would fall under a conditional use. So I will respond to that as in general. WB2 allows for 30 uses, permitted uses. WB2 allows for 6 plus government buildings. WB2 allows for 24 additional conditional uses. WB2 allows for 16. So in total, that tally, 54 to WB2, 22 to WB2. I went in the planning board meeting, I went through some of those uses from dry cleaning to a church to uses that would clearly be applicable to this property that would be denied altogether, not even available in a conditional use. That seems more than overreach. It's more like, and what has prompted us to begin this request, and that the overall vision that we had as a developer. Our goal is to create a landmark design that you, as this council, are just as proud of as we are. We want to create a legacy style vision that sets a standard for this entryway into Whitefish. The larger possible uses will still clearly fall under a conditional use for WB2 and offer this very council plenty of needed oversight, which we do not shy away from. We are confident in our team, our vision, and we embrace the opportunity to present any future plans to this city planning staff and ultimately to this council. While you may have heard some public comment that Wendy addressed from neighbors that are clearly against this project, which we can understand that change like this is not easy for anyone who adjoins a property such as these. The information, however, that was presented were opinions and non-factual. Their agenda is completely irrelevant to the zoning question before us tonight. Complaints that this project will in any way make access from Iverson to Highway 93 more dangerous is not realistic. Stories that easements to the light have been denied are completely false. Iverson Lane continues to exist. All previous easements are unchanged. Property owners that utilize it are free to use their properties as they currently have, and access to the highway is between they and the highway department, not us. To us, the facts are very simple. We've requested an extension of services based on the growth policy. We have requested zoning. That shows these parcels are primarily 90% located in the growth policy portion designated as WB2 zoning. Any other zoning will impact the ability to develop this property due to tremendously high costs of infrastructure that would not be supported by the minimal uses allowed under WBT zoning. Any development we require as a developer to bring city services will be required to bring them all the way to the intersection of 40 and 93 at a substantial cost, some of which needs to be redone north of our properties in order to bring city services to the light. Any plan we create will include a backage road of some sort that will allow for additional properties that would want to access the intersection to have that ability, which we will show you in a second. The more restrictive zoning would make us have to completely reevaluate this vision and reconsider the very act of requesting annexation in the first place. I ask each of you this evening to put yourself in our position, as I will always do in return. So last time I've gotten to show these to the planning board in both meetings. I felt like they kind of fell on deaf ears and a lot of it was ignored, but we had Kate Walker, formerly Bruce Booty's office, create a few concepts. We have nothing planned for these properties right now. Obviously, this is an integral decision to anything that we do, but we wanted to kind of show a few concepts of how we would propose these properties to be developed. This first portion of it, or the highway frontage, in a very park-like setting. This is the much discussed Iverson Lane right here, which will stay. Access to the highway will be unchanged. This would be obviously a right turn in and likely a right turn out. This would be the light into the future road. This would be the backage road. One comment that you brought up was other properties in that region, potentially, why would they not have access to the highway? I think the planning department would be a great sounding board as to the viability, some of the decisions that were of that being accessible by other streets. It's incredibly dangerous to get out on Highway 93 that close to the light. That's why this light coming into this property is so important. I think some of the decisions that were made to deny recent projects far down 93 further, where it's quite a bit safer to get out, are based upon impact on traffic on 93. Everything points to this property being the property that ideally fits WB2 zoning. We have an intersection that is unlimiting to what can be done for this parcel and for other parcels. We have no plans for what will go here. Any large project is going to come back to the council for conditional use. You want to pull this one up? This one shows just a little bit more visually kind of what a concept, NWDS was engaged simply to create something that would fit a vision within Whitefish's overall plans and ours that would be more of a buffered from the highway, highly park-like, low impact. That's the vision that Dean and I have. Any heavy use, large box store type of development is not a vision that we have. I don't think you've ever seen my company bring a project before the city that is a large, unattractive type of project. This would fit much more of the type project we have in mind for it. So we wanted to kind of give a little bit of a vision. Again, we don't have a specific plan. We're gonna work around the decision this evening, which we hope is in our favor, and we hope that anyone that saw it any other way in prior meetings, that we can sway your vote and make all of us part of the same team here. That's it for me.
Thanks, Eric. And nice to meet you, Dean. Any questions for Eric or Dean? Rebecca, did you have?
So I'm just curious about the water issue. I went out there today to look at it, and I called the DEQ and looked at the thing. So is that the final solution then? Is just the culvert that's created with the two drainage things at the end? Is there any revegetation or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the portion that's in front, the parcel doesn't go all the way to the highway. That's a state easement through there for utilities. So we're in the process of having NWDS create a landscaping plan for that easement area, which is kind of unheard of along the corridor. No one puts any money into making it attractive a state easement, right? Yeah. We're going to that extreme. You can see it's been replanted and trying to restore it to the best of our ability until we get that permit. But the long-term solution that we plan there would be very much like the visual renderings that we showed you there. We do want a highly vegetated, green space focused master plan here that buffers it from the highway, which helps buffer the noise, which lowers the impact visually when you pull up to that light. We want it to be a project that entices and embraces the vision, the overall vision of Whitefish, which is a lot of trees, yes. That it does look very bare right now, and we apologize. We did that through winter. Wasn't very easy to do it, but we did want to get it done so that we could manage that runoff for this spring. To clear up any misconceptions about that property, that was not considered by DEQ a wetlands. It was considered unmanaged runoff. It is not connected to any waterway. So all we had to do was create through civil engineers, being Carver Engineering, a plan that managed that runoff, which is what you see there now. But I would say that entire thing is, from its finality, is 10% there. All we're doing is managing runoff at this stage so it didn't get wet again. From that point forward, the 90% that you're going to see is to come.
Okay, so you feel like that mitigation is adequate to build on that site then? Because it was pretty full of water for a long time, but you think that's going to work then?
Yeah, you'd be surprised when we dug down that there was no groundwater there as the engineers tested and made sure of before we proceeded with that plan. And people way smarter than me that we employ and rely on to make those decisions have made all those studies and those decisions, not me. So whatever they would have came back with, we would have done. This is the plan that the experts came up with to properly manage that. And it was surprisingly far easier of a design than what we had anticipated, and does adequately meet all requirements and to an excess.
Okay, thank you for that. And then just a little bit more clarification on the, okay, so I should explain. I like to see things long-term, like, because we have to tie the whole city together. So I'm still confused about the easement. What Wendy had told me is we can't even consider it because it's a private situation. But are you working with the landowners on that, or is that just off the table completely?
Yes, ma'am, we have worked with them.
Okay.
I probably personally got far more time in it than I would ever have anticipated, trying to make something so easy work. We got a lot of pushback in that the owners wanted to make a good deal better, for lack of a better phrase. We offered them an exchange, just to clarify, and this is proven by facts, emails, and letters from attorneys in negotiations with those landowners, a like-kind exchange of an easement. The easement on Iverson would transfer to our new road, right now unnamed, but whatever name we come up with, Iverson would go away and they would access the highway through the light, which they had been doing without authorization, driving through the 25-foot state easement, highway department easement. When that went away, when this project started to proceed, they lost that access. So we offered them the exact same access, but on a new, beautiful road designed to City of Whitefish standards, a backage road, which we represented in our rendering to you. They came back with a strong pushback of absolutely not unless we would grant them unlimited commercial access, not residential, which is what their properties are being utilized for now. We responded that we would not approve that, and these properties are not annexed into the city of Whitefish. So the current zoning under the county zoning, as Wendy pointed out earlier, I believe what those are zoned, has tremendous ability to do things that I wouldn't approve of, and I don't think you would approve of. And the properties to the south of the light represent those type uses. We refused based upon that more than anything. They responded that they would not sign a residential easement, which proves they have a goal of creating a commercial use there. So to protect these parcels and the city of Whitefish, we denied that request. However, in our last negotiation and conversation with them, facing face-to-face insults from these neighbors, we still offered and turned the other cheek and were willing to grant them the type easement that they were requesting, being commercial, only if we were able to approve if the properties were annexed and zoned by the city of Whitefish, and we were able to approve the uses. So that is where we sit at today. They've been unresponsive, and as they commented to the planning board, completely false in the accusations that we don't want to give them access to the light. I have open arms requested that they take that access to the light. They're fine to use the light right now, but it's just not going to be legal and in writing.
It's complicated. All right, thank you for going into detail about that, because it's not just, right now it's just your parcel, but it will be other things later, so thank you.
Frank?
Eric, I'm just, your enumeration of the differences in terms of the numbers of permitted uses under WB2 versus the WBT, I get that. There's raw numbers there, and they're much less under WBT than they are under WB2. I guess the reality question is, okay, there are less, but does that affect your plans? And why?
Sure. Obviously far less. Like the numbers I stated are the numbers right out of city documents, right? So the usage, in order for these parcels to pencil out, we've already had Carver Engineering working with the City of Whitefish Public Works and trying to figure out getting city utilities up to that intersection, what the costs were going to be and how it's going to transpire. There's multiple ways we can do it, none of which are inexpensive, extremely costly. We have to go back north of these properties, or the furthest north boundary you would think would be the point we should be able to pick up city utilities, or where they end at. But because of gravity feed situations, we've got to go further north and redo the lines that are there now in order to make this all work, which we would be happy to do and absorb those costs. The road that we put in as a backage road would greatly impact, in my overall vision and Dean's overall vision for this, the future, I believe, for Whitefish, and the ability to all of these parcels that adjoin this in any capacity to get access to the light is the only real way to develop these properties. So the cost for us to incur to develop these parcels with a backage road that is substantial in cost would not pencil out again. So now we're looking at parcels that have far less use, much less valuable use to our potential tenants, that won't justify us bringing city utilities in there or creating a spectacular backage road that we may all be sitting here at some point figuring out a way for other owners and other uses to access that light through. That's how it would tremendously impact this particular parcel negatively.
Thank you.
Further questions for Eric? Giuseppe? Okay, we'll take public comment, and then we can direct questions to staff. Thanks, Giuseppe. Thanks, Eric.
Yes, sir. Thanks, everybody.
We'll call you back up if
Okay.
there's further needs. Thanks, Dean. We did advertise for a public hearing on this item. Are there any public comments this evening? Mary?
Good evening, Mary Flowers, Citizens for a Better Flathead, 135 South Main. You have from the planning board packet, our comments, and I just wanted to, I have not had chance to really look in depth at the alternative finding of facts that the city staff prepared, but I would ask that you look at finding 8 and finding 11. I'm not sure that those accurately are consistent with the recommended WB2 zoning. Finding 11 says the proposed zone change is consistent with the historical, established, and trending use patterns, which I think the reason that you went to the WB2 zoning and the corridor plan was to really create and to articulate a different vision of the pattern of growth that the city wanted to see, and to affirm that they did not want strip commercial development going down that highway corridor. So I would look at finding 11. Finding 8 is a little confusing to me, and perhaps you can, if what it's saying is that the business transitional zone is the closest equivalent to B4. I'm not sure if that's County B4, if that's what the intent of the council is. Again, we feel that we support the planning board's recommendation that this property be zoned to the transitional zoning. Having actively participated along with a lot of public in that corridor zone, and to have at the 12th hour the planning director say there was an inconsistency, I think needs to be looked at more carefully. I don't think it should be, that it should influence what the intent and what the public believed, and I think what many of you believed you were adopting when you adopt that zoning for this corridor. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Further public testimony? Michelle, anyone online? I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for discussion or questions, or preferably a motion. But Giuseppe, did you have questions?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have a number of questions for Wendy, if you wouldn't mind. I'm scratching my head here on this one for a number of reasons, and I want to make sure I and the public understands at least the chronology. So my first question is, if the WBT did not exist, let's assume it doesn't exist, what would be this property zoned at?
WB2,
And why?
because that's the most closest zone that we have.
And
it
it's
would-
because of Montana Code annotated as well.
Right.
Thank you. Number 2, when the applicant applied for annexation and the city approved the extension of city limits, and that was resolution 23-05 that we passed on 2/21/23, and it was returned approved in 3/9/23. Am I correct?
Correct.
Was WBT enacted already?
No.
Okay, so the applicant applied and we extended the city limits, and the applicant's expectation, as well as their investors, accordingly to MCA and the growth policy, was they were going to have a WB2 type land.
I
Thank
believe
you.
that's true.
Thank you. So, further question. If we go to page 80 of the packet, and that reminds me that when we approved WBT, it was clearly stating that the zoning overlay was south of Highway 40. Am I correct in my understanding?
Yep, that's what it
So
says.
if when we approved WBT, the understanding was south of Highway 40, what would have been the understanding north of Highway 40?
I don't know, maybe Dave could help chime in here since he was more involved in the corridor plan.
I mean, when we designed the transitional zoning as part of the corridor plan, we just kind of put together the bones of what a transitional zone would be. It was designed to be something that would apply to commercial properties that wouldn't have the same types of very intense traffic and uses as would be further north of Highway 40, where you have all the accesses and the speed limit slows down. We were trying to put a zone together where we could control the access points, consolidate accesses, have backage roads, and then limit the uses to ones that wouldn't be high traffic uses. And that's why that was, south of Highway 40, that BT transitional zone made sense, and that's why the plan calls for it there. I mean, south of there, which is why, the town pump got a B2 zoning, that's what it was historically. And these properties, for the last 42 years, have had a B2 zoning or equivalent when it was either in the city's jurisdiction or in the county's.
Thank you. So here I am, and I normally state that if city staff recommends something and the planning board recommends it, I have no question. But right now I have a city staff that recommends one type of zoning, and the planning board voted the first time on your first recommendation 3-2 against it.
Right.
And then when you offered alternate findings of fact, they voted 4-1 to approve. Okay. So I read the minutes, and I have my colleague here, Councilor Cunell, on the record and on the paper saying this is a tricky one as it looks at the permitted uses in WB2 versus WBT. And it was the intent of council when they extended our services, we wanted to have more control over this area.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure why Councilor Caltabiano is reading something directly out of the minutes that is public knowledge.
Because I have a question about this. No, it is for the staff.
Continue.
Thank you. The question was, is this the WB2 zone or just outside? The timing is hard for him to swallow, I'm reading the minutes, based on the way things went down. We have been burned before, unfortunately, and the number of permitted uses in WB2 is too much, too great, especially in his mind, and this corner in this one place. Council has the ultimate decision. Now, my question to you is, you need to apply the zoning code, the MCA, and you paid to do this job. How do you know when it is too much? Why wasn't town pump too much then? Can you point me on any zoning regulation or any legislation or rules that tells you when it's too much so you give me the right recommendations? Because right now I'm at a loss. You guys recommended WB2, and you have a number of finding of facts, and 3 of those finding of facts have been turned 180 degrees by the planning board. So you as the city planner, which findings of fact are you recommending?
Well, staff is still supporting the WB2.
Thank you.
Rebecca.
I have a question for our attorney, Ms. Jacobs. How does it work when 90% of the lot is in WB2 and 10% is WBT? Are we legally able to pick one or the other? I mean, is there any precedent for this that you've seen before? Because I can't remember any. I know we've had divided lots before, but I just don't remember anything quite like this on planning board or anything before. So legally, we can choose one or the other, though?
Our policy as a city has not been to downzone people. That does not mean that you cannot downzone somebody.
You would consider the WBT a downzone?
I do.
Okay.
Further questions for staff? Steve?
We have the ultimate say, correct? City council gets to say when somebody annexes into the city.
Correct.
Does city council have the ultimate right to determine whatever their zone should be?
Yeah, if it's in accordance with the growth policy and the factors that Wendy discussed. I will say that I tend to agree with Mary that if you guys were to go WBT, we probably need to revise finding 8. It doesn't seem very consistent with the alternative findings, so.
Okay. You're not done, I'm not done yet, Angie, sorry.
Turn my microphone off, in other
And
words.
we do have, we have drafted findings that the planning board adopted, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And does that meet the legal standard for what city council can do then?
Yes, as long as you have findings to support your decision, but again, I'm going to agree with Mary that if looking at the findings, you are probably going to want to revise finding 8 because the WBT is not the most equivalent to the county B4. So I would caution you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Frank?
It is clear that the Highway 93 growth policy is part of our growth policy. It, as I recall, pretty clearly through all the processes was discussing not only these parcels as being part of the WBT. I understand how it got drafted at the end. But I think all of the discussion around that was that those properties that were at the south end of the city that were in the Highway 40 area were in the county, and they were in the county zoning for their transitional district or whatever it was, and that's what we wanted to put back in for that area. That's my recollection, Dave. Is that not is that inconsistent?
I mean, in general, we talked a lot about the County B4 properties. I think we were mostly focused on like the T. Bauer lot,
Yeah.
The boat dealership, and those other properties, that go further south. During the discussion on that, I don't know that we, spent a lot of time talking about, this particular property
Correct.
as part of that, but it was zoned the same before because the county changed the zoning on all those other lots that are south of 40. They used to be SAG 5.
Right.
And when they were in our jurisdiction, they were SAG 5, whereas this property had been B2 before. And so, that's where there's a little bit of a disconnect because, these properties have always had that B2 designation, whereas all the other ones, including the boat dealership, all had a SAG 5, and T. Bowers had a SAG 5, which is, a completely different zoning. And when the county was going through their process of changing the zoning, we had recommended, if they're going to change it to commercial, it be like a business transitional or a business service district. We were very adamant that they not extend that, our B2 or their equivalent of it south of 40, but they went ahead and did that anyway. But yeah, so when all the text of the Highway 93 corridor plan talks about south of Highway 40, the map, however, and I don't know how this happened, but it shows a transitional zone over these properties. Probably because they were all B4, and when the map was put together, that it was just put over all the B4 lots. But there is, a little bit of a dichotomy between the map in the plan and the text of the plan.
Thank you, Dave.
Anything further? Any other questions for staff? Dave, I just wanted to clarify a few things. If the B2 is adopted, hotels, motels, other lodging facilities, as well as formula restaurants, all would come in under a conditional use permit, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Under that conditional process, we could obviously, whoever's here at the time, condition the approvals to increase setbacks as well as landscaping requirements consistent with the WBT
Yep, absolutely,
in
yeah.
spirit.
Yeah, you guys can put whatever conditions that are, reasonable on there,
As
including,
long as they're mitigating the
access and
impact
easements
that's
and all
defined
that
by
stuff.
council.
Yep.
Impact. Can you describe just very briefly, Dave, how this discrepancy came about between the growth policy B2 and a 3-year process that ultimately recommended BT for these properties?
Well, it recommended a transitional zoning over them, so it's a future land use map, so it doesn't,
Right.
not necessarily a zoning map. And, and there is some, overlap between different zones. A lot of the future land use designations have multiple zones that could apply to them, so it didn't necessarily recommend zoning. I just think through the process, I don't know if it changed at the end, or I know some of the early drafts showed that at the B2 or the secondary business going to there. But yeah, it was just something that was overlooked through the process, that those two things weren't consistent with each other in the text and the map. And I'm not sure how it happened,
Angie, can you answer this question? If the applicant isn't pleased with the outcome tonight, what is the process for and I'm not projecting here, but what is his right for de-annexation?
They can petition for de-annexation. I can recall one that we did, Bruce Tate's property on the lake.
Yep, I remember
Several
that.
years ago,
Yep.
yeah.
Is that a rigorous process or one that would be risky for the developer and applicant?
I mean, I don't think it's necessarily risky, as I recall, and it was a while ago. I think Bruce just wrote us a letter or no, he filed a petition to de-annex, and the council acted on it.
Okay.
But again, any sort of annexation, de-annexation is kind of at your, and that's your guys' discretions. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I would like to give you more, like,
That's
history on
quite-
the
I was here.
process,
I
but
remember,
just,
yeah.
off the top of my head, I just remember Bruce's.
That's fine. Any further questions for staff or the applicant for that matter? I would welcome a motion one way or another, just to keep the discussion moving.
Mr. Mayor, Council, I move to approve WZC 23-02 at the finding of facts originally presented by the city planning staff, which point towards a WB2 zoning.
Is there a second to the motion? And the motion does fail for lack of a second.
Okay, let's try another one. Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve ordinance, my eyes are so bad tonight,
23-7.
23-7, an ordinance rezoning 11.9 acres of land, essentially zoning it WBT and WCR, I believe is correct, pursuant to the findings of fact issued by and approved by the planning department, or by the planning board.
That's seconded by Councilor Norton. Frank, does that motion include the proposed amendment to finding number 8?
Yes.
And Ange, can you just review that change to the finding, please? Or if you've had a chance to think about it?
Yeah, so I guess I would suggest that it read, the proposed zone change considers the character of the district and its suitability for particular uses, because of single-family residential on large lots and commercial uses. And then I just put a period and get rid of, and the proposed zoning will be most equivalent to the County B4 zoning district.
Okay, so that language is stricken with your motion, Frank?
It is.
Okay, and that's specific to finding number 8. Further discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to speak to my motion in any case. Eric, I'm sorry that the motion to approve it under the WB2 failed. I understand why it did. We've been discussing the WBT zoning for 2 or 3 years. And our concern with that area of the city is that we were only willing to accept properties that would fit with what the vision of this city was. And I think the Highway 93 corridor plan gave us a good indication of what they wanted. The 2007 growth policy was 2007, and we all acknowledge that it's been amended, and so we're fine. But the more current version of what the city wants this to be, or the citizens want it to be, is WBT. I compliment you on the presentations you made tonight, and you made all the logical arguments I could think to make. But given the history of this, and given and I hope that we can find, with whatever proposals you're able to come back to with, if you want to live with that, that we will make any changes that would be appropriate and consistent with that WBT zoning. But I just want you to know, I think you've done a good job here. I like the process that you've gone through. You've made all the right arguments. Unfortunately, the city of Whitefish and the citizens have kind of said this is what we really want for the vision of that at this point in our city. So, thanks.
Thank you, Frank. Further comments? Giuseppe?
Yes, since my motion died, I can speak to this one. I'm disappointed about this process. This is the perfect example and case in point why I believe that somewhere we're going against our Constitution that defines separation of powers. Indeed, we right now are ruling as judges. And
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. I would entertain any comments that are relevant to the motion, not ones that are diatribes about public process and how we operate.
I would agree with you, Andy.
I'll finish with the
Please.
towards. I'm going to vote against this motion.
Thank you, Giuseppe. I will remind the council that this is an ordinance and will require a supermajority vote for passage, which includes 4 voting members of the council tonight. I obviously will not be voting. Rebecca.
Yeah, this is a really hard decision for me because I understand staff's position, 40 years of history in the zoning, the underlying zoning. But when I look at the parcel, that there is residential directly behind it, and then I look at our vision for this area, I really think we need to stick with the WBT because it outlines ahead of time what we want to see. When the town pump went in, we didn't have that in place, and so now we know what we want out there, and I just think it's better if we stick with the plans that we have, if it's legally allowed for under our purview to do that. And so I know it's disappointing given how long you've held this property, et cetera, but I think it's more the vision of what our community wants, and I think in the long run, it's better to be upfront about what we're expecting than to have to come through the back door, like John, the mayor, was saying, to add lots and lots of conditions on something. So hopefully it will turn into a really nice project eventually. Thank you.
Further comments? Steve.
Eric, I don't want you to think I'm not sensitive to what you've gone through. I hope you understand that. I also think that there are enough uses that if you're true to your word that you want this to be a flagship opening entrance to our city, there's enough uses in there, and there's enough work that can be done with the city to get what you want to provide all of us, including the council and all the citizens of this town, something that we can be proud of there. And that's the intent of the corridor plan. That is the intent of the WBT zone. I know that's disappointing for you, and that limits some of the things that you could do, but if you look at the permitted use list of WB2, that is a recipe for strip commercial development, and it is clear that the city does not, the citizens of this city do not want strip commercial development that far south. And that's been the basis of my vote the whole time on this. And it does limit some of the things you can do, and at the same time, there's enough that if there is something that if you really want to make this great, there's enough room for that to actually still happen. So I do appreciate all the time that you've put into this, and I appreciate the words that you've said about making this, reserving this as a great place for our town. So we appreciate that.
I'm going to go ahead and call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion does carry on a 4-1 vote with Giuseppe Caltabiano voting in opposition. Thanks, you guys. You guys want to take a 2-minute break or keep pushing? Okay. We'll move to item 8B, consideration of a request from Goose Bay Capital LLC for a conditional use permit for a bar tavern located at 6185 Highway 93 South. The property is zoned WB2. Nelson.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I want to first clarify that this conditional use permit is a reapplication of a conditional use permit that was approved in 2020.
Yep.
The only difference is that there has been development on the lot since. There is a coffee shop and a commercial building as well as a car wash. So the property is zoned WB2. It's located at 6185 Highway 93 South. Staff recommended approval of the conditional use permit And the planning board unanimously approved the request and findings of fact. So again, the reason that this is here is that the WCUP 20-05 expired on May 4th, 2020, as the use for a bar/tavern had not commenced. And so this conditional use permit is again for to transfer a Montana beer and wine license to the property. The property is approximately 1.12 acres. The adjoining land uses are commercial with some residential to the east. Notice is mailed to adjacent landowners within 300 feet on March 31st, 2023. Advisory agencies were notified March 31st. Notice was in the pilot on April 5th. And a sign was posted on the property. We received one comment in support of the approval. And I will review the findings of fact quickly for you. As far as the growth policy compliance, it is designated general commercial, which complies with the WB2 use as no change to the properties proposed with the application. As far as compliance with regulation goes, it is meeting all of the city zoning regulations or will be met at time with conditions of approval. As far as site suitability is concerned, there's adequate usable land area, proposed access meets all emergency standards, there are no environmental constraints. For quality and functionality, the site design has been dealt with, as there's adequate parking, traffic circulation will remain unchanged, and it complies with the current landscaping regulations. There are adequate water and sewer. And again, response times for police and fire are not anticipated to be affected. For neighborhood community impact, it is not anticipated to have a negative impact, as noise, dust, smoke, odor, and other environmental nuisances are not expected. Outdoor lighting meets city standards, and existing roads are anticipated to handle any additional traffic. For neighborhood and community compatibility, it's compatible as the building isn't proposed to change in size. Any future exterior changes require architectural review. The existing neighborhood is a mixture of commercial and residential. And next to the property is an existing bar, restaurant, and casino. And overall, it is compatible with community character. So it is recommended that the Whitefish City Council adopt the findings of fact within staff report WCUP 23-03, and that this conditional use of permit be recommended for approval, subject to the following conditions. Pretty standard. The applicant must maintain and demonstrate continued compliance with all adopted city codes and ordinances. The applicant must provide a minimum of 2 locking bicycle racks as close to the existing building as possible. All lighting must be dark sky compliant. And again, the conditional use permit is valid for 18 months and shall terminate unless commencement of the authorized activity is begun.
Thanks, Nelson. Any questions? Giuseppe?
Nelson, thank you. I'm just curious on the fact that those 4 conditions are all part of the Whitefish City Code. Mm-hmm. So why do we point them out? I mean, nobody would go breach the city code, right?
Correct. That is just standard practice. Because again, most of the conditions, it's just reiterating city code. And in this case, it's reiterating city code that, for example, I went to the site, I couldn't find the 2 bicycle racks, and those are, again, a requirement of city code. And so in this instance, I am just specifically pointing out those sections of the city code that need to be followed through on.
Further questions for council? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing on item 6B, and we'll hold that public hearing now. I assume you're John? Yes. Would you like to comment? No. Okay, thanks very much for coming. With that said, Michelle, anyone online? Oh, Mary, excuse me.
Good evening. I wasn't intending to comment on this, and I have not looked at it in depth. So with that caveat, I would just like to hear some discussion of what kind of precedent this would set elsewhere in the district if other properties wanted to have a conditional use as well to add a few additional machines, and if there's a limit to the number of machines that would be allowed. And if I'm misunderstanding this, I've only just listened to what you've listened to, so I'm trying to just make sure that you ask some questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Giuseppe?
I think staff can answer, but I don't see any machine or casino in here, if that's what Mary's flower is referring to. And
It's a bar tavern request. Yep, correct. It's okay. Correct, Angie?
Yeah, as far as I know, it is. And
Okay.
Giuseppe, just to follow up on your question a little bit that you asked Nelson, we didn't nobody wants to violate the city code, but if no one violated the city code, I probably wouldn't be employed. So, when we list it as conditions of a conditional use permit, even though it is city code, it gives us the mechanism to basically revoke their CUP. So, just.
Rebecca?
A question for planning director. I talked to him earlier about what was going to go in here because when it came through the first time, it was going to be a restaurant. So wondered, Dave, would you just mention that?
I think it's still probably going to be a restaurant associated with like a brewery or a bar. We have, the state has multiple types of liquor licenses. We give an exemption in our code for restaurant beer wine licenses. So if a restaurant wants to serve beer and wine, we don't make them go through a conditional use permit process. This is a restaurant that's going to serve beer and wine, but the license that was available is a full beer and wine license that doesn't have the restrictions of the cabaret license. And so we don't give exceptions for those types of licenses. It just happened to be the one that they were able to buy. And so that's why they had to go through the process. They did get an approval for the same thing, but that, they just, for whatever reason, they weren't able to open in time or find a tenant. So now, since it expired, they're having to come back and get a renewal for that. But from my understanding, it's going to be a restaurant with beer and wine sales.
And the reason why I was asking Dave about what was going in there is because I think a lot of kids and families might also go there too. And so I think it's going to be an area where we need more restaurants of town. So thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Further questions? Motion, please.
Sure. Mr. Mayor, Council, I move to approve WCUP 23-03, the findings of fact in the staff report and the four conditions of approval as recommended by the Whitefish Planning Board on April 20th, 2023.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion carries unanimously. Thanks, John. Thanks, Nelson. You have Dana's report enclosed in the packet. Any questions for Dana? Dana, anything additional to report on?
I will give you a brief update. This Friday will mark the 90th day of the legislative session, which would mark the end. However, they can extend it and likely will into next week. I can tell you I'm very excited for it to be over, but Senate Bill 262, which is related to business licensing, did pass without amendments. As we've read it, this is going to significantly impact our revenues in the general fund. Even without having hired a position and we haven't procured the software, we're still going to face about $140,000 shortfall if we don't come up with some other revenue mechanism. I did write the governor today asking him to support the league's amendment and veto the bill without that amendment. And I know the league is working hard to get some Republican mayors and so forth to reach out in these smaller towns that really rely on this revenue to hopefully convince the governor to do so. But I will let you know on that one as soon as we know what happens. Senate Bill 382, which is the Montana Land Use Planning Act, has passed through its readings in the Senate, so likely headed to the governors. House Bill 465, which is related to the building code fees, was signed by the governor last week, which is fantastic. That means we don't have to stress about having too much fund balance in our building codes fund anymore. We get to have up to 3 times annual appropriations. Senate Bill 245 and 407, those two, I think, were amended in the conference committee and will likely be passing. The scopes were broadened a little bit, but not too bad. One of them, so 407 is related to architectural review committees and not being able to utilize an external board for review. We have some ideas of how we might still be able to do that, but have them be employed as part-time employees. So I think there are ways around it to get some more eyes on projects. House Bill 226 is the one that's related to pension PERS, our public employee retirement system. That one was going to come at a budget hit next year, not this year, but next year. Last I heard that it was changed to an interim study, but I just saw tonight it's going to conference committee tomorrow, and so I don't know what that means, if they're going to still keep it as an interim study or not. So that could be a future year budget issue. There are 2 bills, though, that are providing some local government funding for road maintenance and infrastructure projects, significantly cut from like $276 million down to $20 million, but there will be direct allocations to cities based on, I can't believe it, if it's population or mileage for infrastructure and maintenance from the state's surplus, basically. So that's nice to see that they're thinking about us in some form or fashion. The other thing, we're hoping to have a work session with our impact fee consultant who's working on the update at the next meeting, just to give you bring in, so you guys can see what has been done so far. We're still trying to confirm that that date's gonna work, but we will get a work session with you guys soon so you can see the proposals that are coming forward. And then my only other comment is earlier, I believe this is how the meeting went earlier tonight, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe during the consent agenda discussion, Rebecca pulled the ordinance 2306 off the consent agenda. You guys discussed it, and she had proposed to table it. You guys voted against that, and then you went back and approved the consent agenda, but that item was pulled off. So I think you need to act on ordinance 2306, I believe. So in talking with Michelle and Angie, I think that's the best plan of action.
Cleaner.
So that's all I've got.
Okay. I'll entertain that motion, please, on 23-6.
Make a motion to approve ordinance 23-6 on a second reading.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Giuseppe. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Excuse me. Those opposed, like sign. And that passes on a 4-1 vote with Councilor Norton voting against. Sure.
Dana, what's happening with SB 528, the ADU? Any news on that?
So that one came out, thanks for reminding me of that. That one went through, it was scheduled for 3rd reading this afternoon, and I'm assuming it passed. Once it goes to these conference committees, oftentimes they get approved more quickly. And the 2nd reading, I know, passed like with only 3 people in the Senate voting in opposition. So that's passed through, which means, ADUs will be by right. We do have language in the bill that allows us to regulate short-term rentals of ADUs, so that's good news. But we won't be able to have impact fees on ADUs. There'll be no parking requirements, and then it determines the sizes of them and some other information that you guys are probably aware of now. So it passed as amended, basically.
Thank you.
We'll move to councilor comments. Who would like to start this evening? Giuseppe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 3 very quick points. Number 1, the planning board, with the planning staff, kicked off the public engagement plan for our city growth, Whitefish, Vision Whitefish 2045. I invite everybody to participate. Write an email to Alan Tiefenbach. He has the worst last name than mine. Find the email on the site, tiefenbach@cityofwhitefish.org, to enroll for updates and give feedback as public. Number 2, Whitefish Rotary Club is looking for freshman students, incoming sophomore, interested in a 4-day life-changing experience at the Rotary Youth Leadership Awards. My son went there, and it was very, very educational and leadership teaching. So there are some slots. I invite the parents of the students or the students to apply to the Rotary Club of Whitefish. And finally, this Thursday, May 4th, will be the 79th birthday of Miss Montana. Miss Montana is a DC-3, sadly famous because 13 jumpers died fighting a fire on the Mount Gulch many years ago. We at the Museum of Mountain Flying restored it and flew it Normandy in for the 75th anniversary of D-Day. So we'll have a celebration for the birthday of the plane. You get to eat a full pig roasted by one of our members for free, and whoever wants to talk to the governor, I just found out, is coming to pin a medal, good luck, on the plane for the air service that the plane has given. So if you're free Thursday afternoon, come to Missoula at the Museum of Mountain Flying to celebrate Miss Montana's birthday.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Steve.
Thanks, John. Just a couple, I'd like to ask where we stand in terms of working with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks on a deer management plan. Is that still in the works?
I'll let Bridger take this one.
Okay.
You betcha.
Can I spray them with paintballs in my yard?
We conducted a Fish, Wildlife, and Parks biologist out of Eureka has been working with us on developing a further plan for that. We conducted a deer assessment, somewhat of a count north of the viaduct. It's a very difficult thing to do. As part of that, it's a lot of fun, but it all depends on weather and a
Just
lot
north
of
of
other
the
things.
viaduct?
Correct.
Okay.
There's plenty of issues, but that's the primary ones that we've been getting complaints about, and so we kind of restricted it to that area so we could accomplish it more easily. So I have not heard back from his results of that. He's analyzing the data.
But, so we are in the process of working
We're
that
slowly
forward.
crawling forward.
Okay. All right, because they're multiplying in my yard for sure.
Every year.
They're in my gardens and nothing's even growing.
The Subarus are taking care of them.
Yeah, I got one last year. I don't know if that would be counted a harvest or not, but and then the only other thing I have is that today marks May 1st, so that is the beginning of Hit the Trail Month for Whitefish Legacy Partners. Every mile that you log on the trail with, if you join the Strava group, you can get that on your phone or you can upload it afterwards. But every mile you log on the trail brings money to Whitefish Legacy Partners. So I encourage you to get out on our trail system.
Thanks,
That's all
Steve.
I have.
Frank.
I'd just like to give a shout out to the WCVB and Explore Whitefish for their letter to the editor in the pilot this week, explaining the details of what the CFS charge or fund is and what it does and how it was created and what they do with it. And I just think it's a primer for anybody that has any questions about it. It gives the right answers, it's the truth, and that's what it is. And I can't thank them enough for clearing this air and making it perfectly clear. And if anybody has any questions about it, ask the CVB, they'll give it to you. Call the pilot, and they'll be happy to give you a copy of the editorial. Thanks.
Thanks, Frank. Rebecca.
Yeah, two things for Dana. One is we have openings on our Flathead City County Health Department board. Have we had any applicants for that? I think she's resigning the end of May.
We've advertised but have not received any applicants.
Okay, and then we need someone
Oh,
still.
we have not.
I wasn't sure if we'd advertised.
We haven't advertised in the paper yet, but we have it up online as an opening right
I
now.
just wanted the public to know in case there's anybody that has an interest in that. It would be starting, I think, June 1st. Is that right?
I can't remember when
I
she's
think
serving through.
yeah, I
to
thought
the
it was
end.
the end of May that she was given notice. And then we still need a representative for the Flathead Conservation District. We need two of those, okay. Those are all really important roles for people that have those skills. And then the other thing is, I think a new law has passed, so if you're running for office, you have to register to vote before you file for your campaign. So if anybody is out there thinking about running for office, make sure you're registered to vote, or else you'll be kicked off the opportunity. And the last thing is, I wanted to ask Angie about our non-discrimination ordinance, because some of the laws that have been passed by the legislature are basically stripping away the civil rights of certain people in our society. And we passed a non-discrimination ordinance a number of years ago that's wholly inclusive, meaning gender and identity and all that are covered. And so I don't know how that works when we as a city have declared a certain standard of behaviors and expectations of one another and an honoring of individuality, compared to the state legislature stripping those from people. So would you speak to that just a little bit, Angie?
Sure. Rebecca, as a self-governing unit, we can exercise any power that's not forbid by the Montana Constitution or the legislature itself. So we can provide more protection to individuals than the state, unless they go and amend, I think it's 71113, and prohibit us from doing so. So, I mean, I'd have to look into it more. I've tracked a lot of the stuff at the legislature, but the sheer amount of bills has been exhausting, as I think Dana can tell you. So as of right now, I don't think we're prohibited from enforcing our non-discrimination ordinance. I will say that to the best of my knowledge, we've never actually had a complaint filed in municipal court. But I still think it's important that, you know, we have that in place.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe when we do our debriefing, we could cover that too, because I think I love it that we welcome everybody and we allow everybody to be who they are here. And
yeah, and I agree, Rebecca. I'm actually going to the City Attorney Conference in Bozeman this week, and part of that is a legislative update. So I imagine that's something that we'll be talking about there.
Thank you. And I'm just going to say personally, I have, as an occupational therapist, have treated people that are transsexual. I've had friends and just a lot of people that are living that lifestyle, and it's my heart's with you. That's all I can say.
Thanks, Rebecca. Andy.
A couple of things, I guess. First of all, I just want to tell her I'm always about ice and water, so I have to, but I want to tell everybody that the lake is really, really cold, and just because it's 85 degrees out, being on your paddleboard without a life jacket, being in your canoe without a life jacket, makes me think of the statistic: you stand a 50-50 chance of making a 50-yard swim in 50-degree water. And just because it's 85, that water is like 40-something. I actually went in on Sunday, and I can tell you it's very, very cold. I went in on purpose, so it was okay, Giuseppe, don't worry. So people need to be careful. We had 3 letters in here tonight, and I think we kind of, first one, and then we got stuff from Mary that we all want to read. I just want to address Ed's letter, and Ed had actually approached me a month ago or so, I think, about this. And I know I'm the only one around that was here when the casino overlay was actually created, and we created a very small district in the WB2. And I can tell you at the time we did that because we were sort of seeing the casinoization of Whitefish. And there was a great fear that suddenly we were going to have a lot of neon lights and town pumps on Central Avenue. And it was kind of a little bit of an overreaction to what we were seeing. And I think as we look, and being very close to someone that's in the food business, I can tell you, as Ed said, it is a very marginal business. And for a lot of businesses, particularly if they have beer and wine and the ability to have machines, it can make a huge difference in their sustainability in terms of what they can pay their people, in terms of whether or not they can keep their doors open. So I think that at this point in time, I would certainly be willing personally to revisit that issue. And I think Ed's suggestion, and extending the casino overlay zone is not something we would want to do, but I think possibly take a look at it as a conditioned use for those businesses. Because when that came into play, the way we originally did it as of X date, you had to register the number of machines you had in your business, even if you're, because there's a lot of, obviously, machines in the community that are outside of that casino overlay zone. You registered the number of machines you had. I think it was 15 was maximum allowed per license. But people were stacking licenses, which was happening around the state, which is what our big concern was, that suddenly then we'd see 30 machines, and that's not what we wanted. It wasn't our intention to hurt businesses that had the ability to do it. It was our intention to make our community continue to look nice and not be a casino, essentially. So, as a matter of fact, I think in Ed's location, the Dyer actually did have machines at one time, and I think they went out, and then once they went out, then they couldn't come back in. So, I mean, I think there are ways that we can not casinoize the community and provide some revenue stream for businesses, and we'd obviously have to go back and start at the planning board, and I don't know if we need to do a quick workshop on that or not, but if there's a show of hands, I would certainly support it, so. That's all I have.
Good enough, Ed? You get to come to a work session. Thanks, Andy. The only item I had is, I just saw the email this evening, Kenny Hopkins retirement party next Thursday, May 11th from 5 to 7 at the Great Northern Bar. So hopefully everyone can make that. I think Kenny's worked for the city 18 years, and she'll be sorely missed. Great addition to staff. So on that note, anything further, Dana?
I just have one thing. I will not be here the next meeting.
Okay. Thanks, Andy.
I will be headed to Billings, I forgot, the next Wednesday through Friday, and I'm also going to be meeting with city managers and the league about debriefing from the legislative session. So with the info Angie's bringing and the stuff I'll have from the city manager discussion with the league, I think we'll be able to have a debriefing session with council shortly thereafter.
Great. Thanks, Dana. Anything further from council? We are adjourned. Thanks.